Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're taking a look at weight loss drugs,
Oh, yeah.
like Ozempic and Wegovy.
Okay.
You've probably heard about them,
Mm.
helping people lose weight.
Right.
But it turns out there might be a
Yeah.
lot more to these medications than meets the eye.
Uh-huh.
So we're diving into a fascinating BBC article today.
Oh, cool.
The link is in the show notes as always.
Okay.
And this article explores some brand new research on how these drugs might be impacting
Yeah.
our overall health.
Interesting.
So get ready to be surprised because we're about to uncover some fascinating insights about these drugs
Okay.
that go way beyond just shedding pounds.
All right. I'm ready.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty of this research,
Yeah.
can you give us a quick rundown on how these drugs actually work?
Sure. So these drugs work by mimicking a hormone in our gut called GLP1.
GLP1.
Yeah. And this hormone signals to the brain that we're full,
Oh, okay.
which helps regulate our appetite.
So they basically trick the brain into thinking we've had enough to eat.
That's the idea.
Interesting. Okay, so the BBC article hints that there's something special about this GLP1 hormone.
Yeah.
What makes it so unique?
Well, it turns out that the receptors for GLP1 aren't just in the brain. They're actually found throughout the body.
Hold on. So you're saying a hormone that's produced in the gut
Mm-hmm.
has receptors all over the place?
Exactly.
That's pretty wild.
It is. And that means that these drugs could potentially be influencing a wide range of bodily systems, not just our appetite.
Okay, let me get this straight. So a drug designed to target the brain for weight loss
Yeah.
could actually be having a ripple effect
Right.
across the whole body.
Potentially.
That's incredible. And there's research backing this up.
There is.
Okay, tell me more.
The article highlights a study
Okay.
that analyzed data from almost 2 million people.
2 million people.
Huge sample size. And the researchers found that taking these GLP-1 mimicking drugs was linked to a whole bunch of positive health outcomes.
Wow, that's a lot of data.
It is.
This is starting to sound like these medications might be a real game changer.
They could be.
Okay, so what sorts of positive outcomes are we talking about here?
Well, before we dive into the specifics,
Okay.
it's important to remember that the study focused primarily on people with type 2 diabetes.
Okay, so the findings might not apply equally to everyone.
Right. We need more research to see if these benefits extend to the general population as well.
That makes sense. So with that in mind, what were some of the benefits that this study uncovered?
Well, researchers found that taking these drugs was associated with a lower risk of several serious conditions.
Like what?
Heart problems, dementia.
Really?
They even saw a potential link to a reduced risk of substance abuse
Wow.
and some neurological conditions.
That's a truly remarkable range of potential benefits.
It is.
I'm starting to see why you call these medications interesting at the beginning. But I'm sure there are two sides to this coin, right?
Of course.
Are there any potential drawbacks or risks associated with these drugs?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There are always two sides to consider.
Uh-huh.
And the study did find that those taking these drugs had an increased risk of certain digestive issues.
Oh, like what?
Nausea, diarrhea, things like that.
Oh, that's not fun.
Not really, no.
Okay, so these GLP-1 drugs aren't a magic bullet.
Right.
And like any medication, they come with potential risks.
Exactly.
What's the key takeaway for our listeners here?
The main takeaway is that these drugs are showing some very promising results.
Yeah.
But they're not for everyone.
Okay.
It's crucial to weigh the potential benefits against the potential risks on an individual basis. And, of course, any decision about taking these medications should always be made in consultation with a healthcare professional.
Absolutely excellent advice. So what I'm hearing is that these drugs are potentially revolutionary, but we need to approach them with cautious optimism and personalized care.
I think that's a good way to put it.
But even if you're not personally considering weight loss drugs,
Yeah.
this research offers some important insights, right?
Absolutely. What fascinates me is how this research highlights the interconnectedness of our bodies.
What do you mean?
It reminds us that health isn't just about one isolated issue,
Okay.
but about the whole complex system working together.
I like that thinking about health as a whole system rather than separate parts.
Yeah.
This research really makes you wonder what else we might discover about these drugs and their potential applications in the future.
It certainly does, and it raises an important question.
What's that?
If these drugs are having such broad effects on various systems in the body, what other potential uses might we discover for them down the line?
Yeah, that's a thought-provoking question. But before we get too carried away with all the exciting possibilities, let's take a closer look at some of the specific findings from this research.
One of the things that really stood out to me in that BBC article
Yeah.
was a potential link between these GLP-1 drugs and a reduced risk of dementia.
Oh, wow.
That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah. The idea that a weight loss drug
Right.
could potentially help protect against Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia
Yeah,
is definitely attention-grabbing.
it is.
Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Sure.
How might these drugs be impacting brain health?
Well, we're still in the early stages of understanding the mechanisms involved.
Okay.
But it seems that inflammation might play a key role.
Inflammation.
Yeah, chronic inflammation, which is essentially persistent, low-grade inflammation throughout the body, is increasingly recognized as a contributor to many chronic diseases,
Okay.
including Alzheimer's.
So if these drugs can help reduce overall inflammation,
Yeah.
could that have a protective effect on the brain?
That's the theory. GLP-1 appears to have anti-inflammatory properties.
Interesting.
And by targeting those GLP-1 receptors found throughout the body, including in the brain, these medications might be able to dampen that inflammatory response.
That makes sense, but what's the connection between inflammation
Right.
and something like Alzheimer's disease?
Think of it this way: when there's chronic inflammation in the brain,
Yeah.
it can create a sort of toxic environment that damages brain cells
Oh,
and disrupts communication pathways.
so over time, this damage can contribute to the development of cognitive decline and dementia.
Exactly.
So by reducing inflammation, these drugs could potentially slow down the progression of Alzheimer's,
Potentially, yeah.
or even help prevent it altogether. That would be incredible.
It's certainly a possibility worth exploring, and keep in mind the study also found associations between these medications
Yeah.
and a lower risk of other neurological conditions like schizophrenia and epilepsy.
That's even more intriguing.
It is.
It suggests that these drugs might have a much broader impact on brain function than we initially thought.
Exactly. It opens up a whole new avenue of research
Wow.
into how GLP-1 agonists might influence brain health and potentially treat or prevent a range of neurological disorders.
This is all really fascinating stuff. But before we move on,
Yeah.
I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about the study focusing primarily on people with type 2 diabetes.
Right.
How might that influence the findings?
That's a great question. It's important to remember that people with type 2 diabetes often have other health conditions and may be taking various medications.
Okay.
These factors could influence the results and make it difficult to isolate the specific effects of the GLP-1 drugs.
So the findings might not be directly transferable to the general population.
Exactly. More research is definitely needed
Okay.
to confirm these findings in broader populations and to tease out the complex interplay of factors involved.
That makes sense. It sounds like we're just scratching the surface of understanding the full potential of these medications.
Absolutely. This research raises more questions than it answers.
Uh-huh.
But that's often how scientific breakthroughs happen.
Yeah?
It sparks curiosity and opens up new paths of inquiry.
Well, speaking of new paths, let's talk about that potential link to a reduced risk of substance abuse.
Okay.
That seems like a bit of a wild card.
It is a surprising finding.
Yeah.
But there's a growing body of research suggesting that GLP-1 plays a role in the brain's reward pathways.
Reward pathway.
Yeah, these pathways are involved in addiction,
Interesting.
reinforcing behaviors that trigger the release of dopamine,
Dopamine.
a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure.
Okay.
So by targeting those GLP-1 receptors, these drugs might be interfering with the reward system, making addictive substances less appealing or disrupting those ingrained patterns of behavior.
So by targeting GLP-1, we could potentially disrupt addiction.
It's one hypothesis. It's also possible that by improving overall mental and physical health, including mood and well-being, these drugs could indirectly reduce the urge to self-medicate with substances.
It's like those positive ripple effects we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
It's fascinating how everything seems to be connected.
Precisely. And that's why it's so important to take a holistic view of health.
Yeah.
What impacts one system can often have far-reaching consequences for others.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From potential benefits for brain health and substance abuse to the importance of considering individual circumstances
Right.
and the need for further research.
Yeah.
But there's one more area I want to touch on before we wrap up.
Okay.
You mentioned earlier that these drugs aren't without their risks.
True.
Can you elaborate on that a bit more?
Yeah, so we were talking about some of the risks associated with GLP-1 drugs.
Right. It seems like with any powerful medication, there's always a potential downside.
That's true. It's important to remember that no medication is entirely without risk.
Right.
And these GLP-1 drugs, while showing incredible promise,
Yeah.
do come with some potential side effects.
Can you give us a rundown of some of the common side effects that people might experience?
Sure. The most frequently reported side effects are gastrointestinal in nature. Things like nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea.
Yeah.
These tend to be more common when people first start taking the medication
Okay.
and often subside over time.
So it's like your body needs some time to adjust to this new way of regulating appetite and metabolism.
That's a good way to put it. And it's important to note that not everyone experiences these side effects.
Okay.
And there are ways to manage them.
Like what?
Slowing down the dose increases, for instance, can help minimize discomfort.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Are there any other potential risks aside from those digestive issues?
There are a few less common but more serious risks to be aware of.
Oh.
The study did find a slight increase in the risk of pancreatitis,
Pancreatitis.
which is inflammation of the pancreas
Okay.
in people taking these drugs.
That sounds serious. How common is that side effect?
It's relatively rare, but it's something that doctors monitor for.
Okay.
And there have also been some reports of gallbladder issues in people taking these medications.
So it sounds like it's really important to work closely with a healthcare professional when considering these medications.
Absolutely.
They can help assess your individual risk factors
Right.
and monitor for any potential complications.
Exactly. It's not a decision to be made lightly.
Right.
And having a doctor who can guide you through the process and address any concerns is essential.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential benefits,
Yes.
the risks, and the importance of personalized medical guidance.
Right.
What's the bottom line for our listeners?
The bottom line is that these GLP-1 drugs are a powerful new tool in the fight against obesity and its related health problems.
Okay.
They're showing remarkable potential not only for weight loss, but for a wide range of health improvements.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
It is, however, like any medication, they come with potential risks.
So it's all about weighing those potential benefits and risks carefully, right?
Exactly.
And making informed decisions in consultation with a healthcare professional.
That's the key.
This has been a truly fascinating deep dive into the world of weight loss drugs
It has.
and their unexpected impact on overall health. I feel like we've uncovered a whole new layer of understanding about how our bodies work
Yeah.
and the complex interplay between different systems.
It's really fascinating.
It is, and it just goes to show that there's always more to learn about our health
Absolutely.
and how everything is connected.
Well said. And I hope this deep dive has encouraged our listeners to do the same.
To do what?
To stay curious, stay informed, and keep asking questions.
Absolutely. Remember, you can find the link to that BBC article we discussed in the show notes,
Yes.
so you can explore this topic further on your own.
And for more insights on health and nutrition, visit us at masalamonk.com.
That's right.
We have tons of resources, including blog posts, recipes, and even some great products to support your wellness journey.
That's right. And if you enjoy this episode, please share it with your friends and family.
Yeah, spread the word.
Let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay curious and keep diving deep.